All right, welcome again to Social Distillation, the submarine still of the internet, where we attempt to drop the bead and pour white lightning straight onto your brain. What are we talking about today, Samo?
We've got the Crossroads of Twilight.
Bad
Yes.
meds. Yeah,
Yeah. I
it's
keep
quite
I
a
wanted to say
choice.
Path of Daggers again, but for some reason I keep getting those two.
I think it's because I remember when it came out and we kind of talked about it and we had similar feelings because you waited so long for Path of Daggers because he put out the big white book in New Spring, so it took longer. And there wasn't a whole lot that happened in it. It was a lot of setup for Winter's Heart, which seems odd as we talked about when we went over it, because there is that really big battle in the wilderness at the end of it, and yet nothing happened. I mean, that was kind of the point of that whole climax, was Rand realizing or feeling like he hadn't done anything. And so same thing here. It doesn't feel like very much happens.
Mm-hmm.
Um, outside of even with Matt's storyline, because the event, the thing that happened was him kidnapping Tuan, and then he's kind of starting to get to know her, but even then the courtship part of it doesn't really go anywhere in this book to speak of. So it, in a lot of ways, it is like Path of Daggers, but worse. I think it makes me appreciate Path of Daggers more because, relatively speaking, I feel like more actually happens in Daggers than happens in Twilight.
Yeah, I'm looking at the comments real quick. See if there was anything, because there was something that I looked at them the other day. There was something that jogged my memory when you were talking there. It's
And
Oh yeah, the beginning of the ridiculous Matt cover backstories. He has a penchant for these long, convoluted stories that turn out to be completely unnecessary and unused in the plot. Yeah, that's pretty much what you were talking about right there. Uh,
yeah, it is. It's very similar to what's going on with Perrin, but Perrin is worse because it started sooner. His convoluted story that doesn't go anywhere started a couple books ago.
yeah,
Um,
that was a timeline thing though, because remember, Perrin was basically the main character of book 4,
yes.
and Matt's story kind of continued after that. Where so Perrin, we basically got to a good stopping point with him, and then he wasn't in book 5 at all.
Hmm.
Matt, that happened later, so he kind of took turns with that, and so that's more of a chronological thing than anything else. But this part of Matt's story is, I don't know, I think he got caught between, I want this to happen but it's not very believable, so I need this
Hmm.
big
Hmm.
long convoluted thing
That
that ultimately makes it believable that he's going to settle down with Tuan.
that's a really interesting point, because I was thinking along those lines, but I hadn't made the connection there when I was looking through this. When I was looking through it this morning and thinking, boy, I hope Sam has some stuff to say, because I kind of don't. Most of my thoughts are actually, we're actually going to have probably a more sizable spoiler section than we've had lately, um, because uh, I kind of feel the same way looking back and thinking, I see where he's going here.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I feel like maybe he thought he had to do more, because as we've griped about, our big problem with Perrin's, I think Scott hit the nail on the head with his terming it the slog, is that it's so out of character.
Well, I
He's
was just going to
reversed
use
his character.
those exact same words, and that's what makes this a slog for both characters right now,
Mhm.
because Perrin is out of character right now, and Jordan is trying to justify Matt going out of character to end the book, to end the books, I should say,
Mm.
where the whole settle down, be married, all of that. He's trying to set up this whole. Oh, that was a spoiler, I guess. But I mean, if you don't know what's happening by now,
Well, and
it was prophesied.
yeah, we've known for four books. The Shadow Rising is when he goes through the doorway. He's fated to marry the daughter of the Nine Moons, and starting with the beginning of the last book, we know, oh, there's the daughter of the Nine Moons. We finally met her. So
Yeah,
you
and
know what's going to
he
happen.
had
It's just a matter of
to
how it
create
happens.
he had to create a situation where Matt can still be Matt, but this prophecy happened that is
Which
against all odds. Where and Perrin has to be Perrin, but I need these things to happen so Perrin can't be Perrin.
Which makes me wonder, because he's generally so good at writing men, writing women, and writing men and women together, writing relationships, how they interact, how they conflict. Uh, and I mean, you look at Nynaeve. Nynaeve's a great example of this is someone who probably thought she would never marry. That she was married to her job. She was going to be the wisdom, and wisdom seldom marry. She says that in The Eye of the World. Um, and Aes Sedai even less so. When she goes on to be an Aes Sedai, and yet then she meets Lan, and it's everything just clicks, and it just happens. That's kind of how things work. I've talked to a lot of people. There are plenty of anecdotal examples, and I wouldn't be surprised if we're going to get into a little sexy time with Samo here on accident. I would imagine there might be even some degree of data to support that. I I know for you and for me, I wasn't looking to get married when I found my wife, and it just clicked. It just happened.
Well, see,
It works that
yeah,
way.
we'll go over this in the spoiler time episodes, but I actually have mapped mine back because I'm a Malibu meditator and I reflect a lot. But I actually can say at the time that I got married the second time, not the first. The first time was completely, like you said, I wasn't looking to, but this thing happened and I was caught up in the chemicals, right?
Mm-hmm.
The second time, I really can say I was probably looking to be a father.
Mm.
I probably that need was really there, and because I can map a lot of decisions I've made since then to the fact that I want to be a good father,
Mm.
and I want to not be the fathers I had. And I think that's actually as much nature as it was nurture, because I just had examples of it. It was right there in front of my face. But I think any good father, if they really reflect, can say this is not just me trying to be this good thing, it's me trying to prevent the bad thing.
My
I almost went off a cliff to prevent
mm,
him from going off a
mhm,
cliff.
mhm.
And if you look at a lot of little decisions, there's a lot of little cliffs that
My point being, I think you may be right in what is happening with Matt, that Jordan felt like he had to go out of his way to justify Matt's turn here, because for 5 books now, from book 4 to book 9, he's been fighting this. We brought up the I forgot her name again, the spear maiden that he was shacking up with,
Melindra.
Melindra, and he kept asking, "Are you sure Daughter of the Nine Winds means nothing to you?" Because as attached as he was to her, he did not want to settle down,
Mm-hmm.
even though he had kind of settled down with her.
Well, and as we've really heavily psychoanalyzed him in the last 8 books, minus the one he wasn't in, which was Path of Daggers, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. uh he didn't have to go that far, because as we
Exactly.
overbroke everything down, we've kind of figured out that he's the company man that just grumbles the whole time.
Exactly.
So he could have been the husband that just grumbled about being
It
settled down.
exactly. And I
Yeah.
hadn't even thought of it till I was thinking out loud that he had actually kind of settled down with Melindra. That I think that's
Mhm.
one of the reasons he was, besides the fact that he had to kill a woman, and a woman that he had been, sexually and emotionally involved with for weeks, if not months. I can't remember the timeline there, but it actually probably was a couple of months. So that's a serious relationship. So he had basically settled down, as much as he talked about not settling down.
Yeah,
So,
and Perrin, this kind of makes sense a little bit, even though it slogs out, because, and I want to kind of bring him up to segue back to him because we're
mhm,
about to talk about him, is he's a very overly structured person. He's like my wife. She likes to plan the vacations. I hate to plan
mm,
the vacations. But when something goes wrong on vacation, she melts down. And his Perrin already had a box that marriage
mm,
fit in. He had a box that marriage fit in. He had a box that his life fit in. He had a box that, even the last battle fit in. He's trying to, like, okay, we're the good guys. We're gonna win. Rand's gonna do his thing, and hopefully he doesn't kill everybody. But we're gonna fit everything in here. And this disrupted his box.
mm.
Barrelane disrupted his box. and he doesn't know how to handle it, and he just keeps dropping the ball in every moment. And so that's where he's at. But Jordan keeps trying to. This is the thing. We keep talking about Perrin going off character, but I actually had a beef with the first couple pages of this chapter, this first chapter, which I don't think we mentioned it. We're starting in chapter 5, Forging of the Hammer. He's trying to bring back the character of being careful and meticulous, but then the actions aren't speaking to the words.
Well, that's actually
that's what's making this a slog. If the actions fit the words, like 172 in the hardcover, I don't know what it is in the soft cover. About halfway down, her kidnappers had gained a long lead because he was hasty, but since then he had been careful, and as he had been in the smithy, his anger was hardened and shaped to a purpose, and he's trying to play on that. Okay, this is him going back to that character development. But then we don't get the actions after this to keep that going. He keeps being hasty.
I somewhat disagree, though, because I had something of an epiphany here in the same place in these first few pages. So, when we're getting ready to do these, I skim through to refresh my memory.
The first few pages are the bulk of the conversation here.
I actually read this first chapter completely word for word because I was the chapter title, and this is why I say I may have a lot of spoiler thoughts, because I had a thought when I saw the title and thought, is this alluding to something that happens in the last book? It's either at the end of the second to the last book or the beginning of the last book. I can't remember exactly where it happens.
Yeah,
where he forges a hammer.
I had that same thought, and let's discuss that further in the spoilers, because it's part of my beef with Sanderson.
So that's what I was looking for, and I kind of found something else here, which is you just said it here in this quote, is his anger was hardened. I think what's going on here is he's becoming Rand. He's supposed to be a counterbalance to Rand. To your point, talking about the opening prophecy.
No, he's supposed to be a leg in the tripod.
He's a leg in the tripod.
Yeah. There's no counterbalance because there's no direct push. But any one of those legs
balance Rand and Matt. He's kind of the one in between there, in between their personalities.
But there are 5 Ta'veren, though.
Please stop. So he helps balance them, but he's becoming Rand. And really where that jumped out at me was, let's see, it's a couple pages in here. Yeah, it's 171. Right before that, there's this long paragraph where he goes through the lists of names of people who were taken. And I don't think it's an accident they're all women. And this is Rand.
I didn't even notice that. That's good.
With the list in his head. So
even the knots on the leather cord, that's like a Rand, like
that's like his list. Yeah. So I don't think this is alluding to when he forges a hammer later. I think the chapter title is an allusion to the Dragon Reborn, because he thinks these things through when he's working the metal, and then when he quenches the metal, he's thinking about, and I hadn't even thought about that Perrin is already thinking about what needs to happen to Rand before Jordan brings it up about strong versus hard. You've got to make the metal strong. If you make it too hard, it's brittle. And the passage you just read, he even thinks to himself, he's becoming hard. He should know better.
And this is the mistake women make, is they keep trying to make us soft, but they should be making us hard.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Speaking of, no, but and so kind of my other epiphany here was that I don't think the slog would be as much of a slog if he hadn't. To me, I can see Perrin going backwards because he's had a severe emotional trauma here, his wife being kidnapped, the uncertainty of it and all that. But it's weakened because Jordan ruined their relationship before this happened. And it makes me wonder if he felt it needed more drama. So they were at odds with each other when she was kidnapped. And so in Perrin's mind, that makes it worse. But
yeah, it plays on something that's very common in people's mind, is the fact that it's that story of X person passes away unexpectedly, and the last thing you said to him was, "I hate you," or
Yeah. Yeah.
it's the don't go to sleep angry kind of mentality, right? Uh, and he's trying to use that to make Perrin even double
Hmm.
down and be more stupid, because he's
And it
making
was,
Perrin stupid on
yes.
purpose. I
And
mean,
it was entirely unnecessary because this, you can see how Perrin would regress or go out of character because he's so strained emotionally. And you would actually feel it more, I think, if he was where he should have been in his relationship with Fail.
I'll give you a good cinematic example of this. Uh, the Gladiator
Mm,
with Russell Crowe, where he's got his family, he's got his field, he's got his wheat, and they go through this scene where they're all in love, and then she's taken from him,
hmm.
and he's taken, and that's what adds power to that.
Hmm.
If he had just had a fight with it would have hit different. I don't know how it would
Hmm.
have hit, but it would have hit different. And it would have been a completely different movie from then on out. But it was
Yeah.
the fact that he was in this place of, this is where I want to be, and then he was taken from it.
And it's why the scene where he takes the mask off in front of Commodus, in front of Joaquin Phoenix,
Mm-hmm.
and says, father to a murdered son, husband to a murdered wife, you can viscerally feel his vengeance. You can
Mm-hmm.
feel his emotion because of that. Because you had the scenes where he was talking to the old guy about he just wants to go home. He just wants to go home to his wife and his son in his fields. That's what he wants. He was yearning for that. And all of this was taken away from him. So you can feel it more. It's, go back to, I think it was in Path of Daggers where they had the scene where they were looking down on the town, and then he tries to apologize to Fail, and it just ruins everything. And we spent a lot of time on that saying this wasn't necessary and it's out of character.
Mm-hmm.
I think if you had
Well,
just
it's
changed
not
that one
it's not
thing,
just out of character. It's out of character because it's something you already resolved.
yes,
Had they never resolved it, it would have been perfectly in
yes,
character,
yes.
and they would have never been married because Falia would have left a long time ago.
So
It's
I'm curious what anyone else thinks, but I kind of had this thought while I was reading back through this, and I thought, I don't feel like this would be as much of a slog because when you read Perrin's parts, it feels like homework. It feels like you have to read this for a class. You have to read this to get to the other stuff. That's how I've always felt about Perrin's stuff. Perrin's scenes starting in Path of Daggers. Uh, and I
we have from external regulation to school achievement, the mediation of self efficacy in school. Yeah, that was a slog too.
anyway.
Anyway, no, it's yeah. There's so much to bitch about here that I don't want to get caught up in just the bitching, because,
Hmm.
like you
Hmm.
said, you want to get through it. I kind of want to just get through this part while where we can highlight the key things about it that put the story forward.
And there were some, that was another thought I had, is reading these, what is it, 5 chapters, 4 chapters,
Mm-hmm.
that in a vacuum, these are this is a good read. These are, well crafted, you know stuff is going on, and I kind of feel like having to go back and kind of spot read, because I've already done my most recent read through where I just read all the way through. Since I'm not doing that, I'm a little more detached from the annoying things that we were talking about. So it's easier to kind of forget all of the annoying crap that happened in the previous couple of books and just look at what's happening right now. And
Mm-hmm.
in that sense, you are progressing things. There are some interesting things that are happening. So if you just look at these chapters, look at Perrin's sections in a vacuum, they really aren't as bad, which uh is a testament to Jordan's ability to write. Just his ability, his proficiency in his craft. But I
I
hope
mean,
you have some
obviously,
specific thoughts.
uh, 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 obviously, people like us didn't stop reading at this point. It, that's that's the thing about Jordan versus Sanderson is it took me a long time to finish the series because I stopped reading one book before the end. And then I made the decision to read it all the way through again from book one and then finish it. But Jordan's writing is so good. We didn't stop reading here, even though almost I'd say 90% of the fans were like the whole
Yeah.
time.
Yeah. All right. So specific things. Um,
We might rewind just a second because it
mhm,
starts with the wolf dream.
mhm,
And I did have thoughts on the meta part of this is the wolf sense where he talks to them. We never really speculate exactly what that means. And the show has it as like they're right there with each other, and there's kind of like an ESP kind of thing, which is it's probably the best you can do for film. But he's talking to these people over miles, right?
mhm.
And you could probably make a kind of a comparison to like a shark can smell a drop of blood for however many gallons or whatever. But realistically, we never understand what the communication mechanism is.
Yeah.
It's not speech. He's not saying something out loud and a wolf 3 miles away can hear him.
Yeah, and Jordan does that on purpose. It's very kind of almost Lovecraftian. Like Lovecraft never describes what the monster looks like. He describes what the person who sees the monster, what they're
Mm.
feeling. So when it comes to the wolf stuff, Perrin thinks repeatedly, it's not quite that. He basically thinks about it and explains it in metaphor. Much like the names. It's not Young Bull isn't his name,
Mm-hmm.
isn't actually his name. It's this, it's actually a scene, you
Mm-hmm.
know. And then Young
Yeah,
Bull
but
is his
how that
human mind putting a name
transfers,
to it.
how that
Exactly.
transfers is what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
And because there's a wolf dream and because there's this meta thing in real life, I think that's, as we've talked about with the power, the dream world is the hub.
Mm. Yep. Um. All right.
But this also puts limits on it because he can only go so far with it, right?
Yes.
So that is just interesting thought for later as we get into the later books.
Um. This. I know we said we want to do more than just bitch, but so the thing that happens in this chapter that's I think probably the most um plot important is uh the discoveries of what Massimo is doing. The reports from Fail and Ball were spying on him, what's going on, and then Bearlane comes to him and tells him even more explosive information about
I mean, she could make me explode anytime.
oh yeah uh about Massimo is dealing with the Sanshin, and that's a major plot point, and it's uh the actual substantive things that happen in Perrin's story arc here, from starting from when he goes off on his own. We've ranted about this before, and Scott's made comments to the same effect of it's a storyline that doesn't go anywhere, it doesn't do anything. There are important things that happen that kind of hint at big things that could or should happen, and I think they get lost in the slog. They get lost in the, you know, uh, Perrin's craziness about Fail, and the frustration with all that, because this is a big effing deal what he's just uncovered here, and it is going to have not worldwide implications like some of this, like kind of what's going on with Matt, at least with Matt, even if there's a hint of slog there, what happens does end up having worldwide ramifications.
Mm-hmm.
That
That's
something that
what I'm noting down
yeah.
for
So
spoilers here.
something that makes sense for his Tavarenness, right? Your Tavarenn, the pattern is weaving itself around you, around all three of you, as three legs of a stool. So what you're doing should be majorly impactful for what the pattern is weaving towards, which is the last battle. And it's kind of a stretch to say that it does.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, and that's with the Perrin storyline. That's where it does fail, and we've touched on it before, but let me try to make it like a concise little package here. Perrin became the man he needed to be for the last battle in book 4.
Mm-hmm.
So either we completely eliminate him from the story until the last battle, or we have to do something with him. So we have to make him regress and then come back. Matt is still in the process of making him into the man that we need for the last battle.
That's a good point. That's a good point. Let's see here. All right. So did you have any more thoughts on this chapter?
No, I'm trying to get somebody to stop vacuuming real quick while we're recording. So hold on.
All right. So the main plot that's happening here is Balwer and which I do find interesting of kind of unpacking Balwer as a character more and who he is and what his abilities are. That is one of the more interesting, side characters in what's happening with Perrin, and to the point of Perrin being who he needs to be for the last battle. At the end of book 4, there is still some growth that he needs. There is still some things that Perrin needs to learn going forward, and I think Balwer is a part of that. Is Balwer is helping him become but the analogy that I think of is he was a capable and effective junior officer at the end of Shadow Rising. Balwer is helping him become a staff officer because Balwer is helping him look at the bigger picture, is helping him realize, and Bearlane to an extent as well. That comes in the next chapter. Is Bearlane talking to him about the price of being a noble, basically, which is that I don't care if you don't feel like sleeping and bathing and grooming. You have to look the part as well as act the part. And again, I'm trying not to bitch too much, but I feel like that's some of the things that are lost in Perrin's chapter here. Is he does have additional growth that he needs. The base was there at the end of book 4. There are still some things he needs to learn.
Yeah, except I'm gonna push back on that a little bit, because when we see him again after book 4, Fael was already doing that for him.
Yes.
When he was meeting with the new people that came in, and he was being the judge, and he was doing all of these. That again, it's the regression that's the problem.
Yes.
Yeah.
And back to my gripe is I feel like it would be more understandable and less of a slog if Jordan hadn't messed up their relationship here, if they had been where they were when we saw him at the opening of Lord of Chaos, of who he had become. He was becoming this minor noble. Now he still needs to learn how to become, he is a lord. He needs to learn how to be a high lord. That kind of idea is there are still things that he needs to learn, still things that are kind of against his nature that he has to learn how to do. And so in that sense, you can see where Balwer and Bearlane come in, because Fael has been taken away. That he still needs people to push him to accept the role that he's in.
No, I'm with you on that. I just think it could have been done a little bit more.
Yes.
This is where Jordan had a little bit of a weak spot, and I think it's from his own personal life. Is, all things considering, from the outside looking in, it seemed like he had an amazing relationship with very few problems. And he's trying to write relationship problems in, and it might be one of his weak points.
That's a good point.
Yeah, because being a man is hard when it comes to people who make you hard because they walk by. And Bearlane is supposed to be that person. But if you have a solid base, that doesn't affect you very much. And he seemed, from all interviews and, outside looking in, and we never know the details, but he didn't have much of that problem himself. And he was trying to
Yeah.
write that problem in.
So devil's advocate, something that just popped into my head that someone might say, yeah, but Rand and Egwene, except they were never really in a relationship, right? So they were constantly butting heads. They were more frenemies than anything, but that's not the same as relationship troubles because they were never really in a relationship. It was almost like a long distance relationship, even though they lived in the same town.
Well, it was what I would imagine the lead up to an arranged marriage would feel like.
Yeah, yeah,
You
that's
know,
yes. I mean, in effect, it kind of was because he
Mhm.
remember there's that scene where he's kind of thinking back.
everybody's
It's yeah,
everybody's nudging them in that direction.
yeah.
You know?
In the Great Hunt, there's the scene where Loyal's talking about arranged marriages, and the boys laugh at him, and then Rand thinks actually it might not be so different with us, and he's thinking back to Marin out there, putting her head together with Tam and talking to Tam and how basically, oh wait, no, yeah, Tam and Vera and Marin kind of basically did arrange me and Egwene.
Mhm.
So yeah, it kind of did happen that way too. So that's a good way to think about it. And so to your point, we don't really see necessarily the relationship trouble. We see relationship drama, but we don't see the you know that kind of difficult, maybe we need to go into marriage counseling kind of relationship trouble. Because even like Nynaeve and Land, they butt heads, they argue, but that's because Nynaeve is hot headed and always has been. But it's not really relationship trouble. It's just a bit of personality clash. Anywho, moving on. Um, the other big thing that happens here, that's a big effing deal, is chapter 6, which is chapter 6, and then into chapter 7, which is the Dark Hounds.
Hmm.
Um, it's a big freaking pack. So it's the lead up to it is chapter 6, and then in chapter 7 is when the Masuri, who I believe is brown, she certainly talks like a brown. Uh,
I thought she
uh
was gray.
Honora is gray.
Honora is gray. Okay, yeah.
Yeah. Um, so she examines the tracks somehow with some sort of weave of her own design and is able to talk about the Dark Hounds, and we actually learned some facts about the Dark Hounds that we didn't really know before about their nature. And then at, Elias gut punches you with the revelation that the just like somehow what's his bucket, was it Balal who created the Trollocs?
No,
No,
Aaron
Balal was the guy in the stone who was the swordsman. Yeah,
Aragorn, excuse me.
Aragorn.
Yeah.
Agenor.
Agenor, yeah.
Yes.
Dashiva. There we go.
So
Currently not anymore
he,
Dashiva.
he somehow used the essence, whether that be soul or what we don't know, of men and beasts to create the Trollocs, and that's how Darkhounds were made, is with the souls of wolves, and that a Darkhound can actually eat the soul of a wolf, and that's how they make another pack. And so, holy crap, that's dark. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
so we learned some facts about them, and this is a big deal. And another thing that I feel like this is a question that was answered at one point, and I'm not sure of the answer of, if they're not looking for him, who are they looking for? Because this, as Masuri says, this is a big pack. She has
Mm-hmm.
never encountered or heard of a pack this big, in part because they start fighting with each other. In much the same way Trollocs can't, you can't have too many Trollocs in a room without a Fade to keep them in line. So this is a big effing pack. So whoever they're looking for, whatever their mission is important. And I'm not sure if we ever get an answer on that of, wait, they're not looking for one of the three Ta'veren who are, really important to the dark and have been for books now. Who are they looking for?
Well, I mean, technically by map, Perrin and Matt are not too far apart. If you really think about it.
Mm-hmm.
So they could be going that direction, but we never see a follow up to that.
Yes.
Uh,
Yeah, because he's in he's in the kind of the is he technically in Gildan now, or is he? Yes, because Queen what's her face is the Queen of Gildan, isn't she?
yeah, yeah.
So he's in Gildan, not too far from not too far from the border, the junction there with Amadicia and Altera, and then Matt is heading up the road, or will be soon heading up the road towards Mirandi. Um, uh, so yeah, they could be looking for Matt. I believe I remember reading, and I don't remember if this was speculation or not, that they were looking for Padden Fane.
Where is Patton Fane at this point, though?
We last saw him in formatting. We don't know where he is now.
Yeah, that's right.
So
Okay, I was
that's
about to say
like
we just saw him. Yeah.
that's like straight east. And I don't know if we get a direction I don't remember there being a direction given of the pack moved off this way. It's just said they moved on, and I
Mm-hmm.
don't remember exactly where. I don't remember if it said they moved south or what. Uh,
Or
so
they could
again,
have, or they
there
could
is
have been
stuff
after
happening here.
Perrin, but then the things happened in Shadow Logoth at the same time, and they may have been redirected.
Um, See, I wouldn't think so. That um, yeah, I wouldn't think so because I think if had they been looking for Perrin, they would have they would have charged into the camp and just murdered everybody because
Mm-hmm.
he's their target. So I think it's clearly that there was this thing in their way. They circled the camp, sniffing, looking, realized whoever their target is wasn't there, and moved on. Um, the only other really big thing that happens in this chunk of chapters then is they find the camp where the Shido are, and they go to it, and then we have whirlpools of color. Which is this the first time we've seen this? I can't remember where we first saw this, where the boys have these kind of visions of swirling colors, and they
No,
can kind of
Rand.
see a.
Both Matt and Rand had swirling
Okay,
already.
so we've seen it
Yeah,
with Matt and
yeah.
Rand before.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I don't think we've seen it with Perrin. Uh, um, so he gets this. Whatever is happening is so monumental that it like I don't
It might be more simple than we're making it on the Dark Hounds.
really.
They might be looking for Rand because we get
That's a good point.
we get tidbits from the Forsaken, like where the hell is he?
That's a good point. That was when Ishi went into that
Mm-hmm.
meeting with them and said he's going to try and cleanse the source. And
Moradin
when
at
he
this
does,
point.
you're
Moradin at this point, not Ishi.
Morden. When you feel him, he has the coding call, so you're going to feel him, and you go there and you stop him. That is a point, is they don't know where he is. And when we saw from Rand's perspective, he's bouncing all over the place. Min talks about that of, you went here and you did this, and then you traveled all the way over here and you did this, and then you bounced way over here and you did that. So yeah, it it could just be that they have no idea where Rand is, and that's the urgency. That's why such a big pack is we need to find him. So that's actually probably the more likely example. Um, and Jordan being Jordan, the hint probably is that in the next chapter we see Rand. You know, we back up a little bit from where we ended last time, and so now the beginning of this book has caught up to the end of Winter's Heart. Um, and you see the reaction. We mentioned this before. Is we're going to see it with when we get to Egwene as well. Is all of uh, the channel? You know, every time we see a channel, they start. They're shocked. They're horrified. They're concerned. And I do find the reactions interesting because like Honora is curious. She's almost brown like there. You would think Missouri would be the one saying, we need to know. We need to go find out what's happening here. And it's Honora who thinks, this is something incredible. We need to go see what it is.
Hmm.
You know, it's either incredibly awful or incredibly good, and we need to know. Um, but
Which is really difficult in the storyline because we get two of those pretty close together. We get the bowl of winds being used,
mhm,
and we get the cleansing being happening, and those are really relatively close in actual world
mhm.
time.
But it is an interesting point that
It's almost
the
like if something big happened again, everybody would be like, "That's the boy who cried wolf," you know.
well, but so that's a good contrast of how much power Rand and Nynaeve are drawing, that it's a worldwide event. Because when we see the after effects of the bowl, it's not people feeling the channeling. It's when it's done and it shoots out streams of power, it shoots out bits of the weave, and people look up and see it. Like we had a scene in Perrin's camp where the channelers, both the Ashaman and the wise ones in Aes Sedai, are all looking up, going, "What the heck is that?" And it
Hmm.
wasn't that they sensed them drawing on the power to use the bowl; it was the
It
shot
was
of
the
power
fact that it
afterwards.
affected the power
Yeah,
had to extend out to affect the weather everywhere.
but now
Yeah.
they're actually feeling the channeling hundreds of miles away. That's how strong it is. I also think that the Perrin's reaction here is interesting because I think this is another, you know, moment of Jordan, where I started with, this is Perrin becoming hard, not strong, with the way he, because on the one hand, he's right. That's Rand's business. It's Rand. He'll deal with it. He's got his work to do. We've got our work to do. But the way he does it, to me, that's uh so I was listening to I just kind of accidentally found this clip of a from a show I hadn't heard of. Somebody named Kyle Morgan, who is a former operator, and that's who he interviews guys who were um operators, and kind of the crux of the show is, what was your service like, and now kind of how did you make that transition. And he's talking to a former Delta operator, which is a big effing deal because those guys don't talk. And he was talking about his where he started kind of versus where he ended up, and he was talking about leadership, what makes a good leader. And it got me to thinking about my dad. And I don't know if he ever put it in these terms, but he talked about things like, this idea that there are some people who think because you are in the position of authority, that means you can be or should be an authoritarian. But that's not good leadership. That is, you can be an authoritarian and you can get your point across, and people will say yes sir, no sir, but then they walk away and they mother f you, and they might do what you say, but they'll do the bare minimum and to the letter,
Hmm.
because you have not engendered respect in them. And there's a stark difference here between how Perrin directs and gives orders now versus, say, Lord of Chaos leading up to Dumai's Wells,
Hmm.
and the way he dealt with people there, and the way he earned respect.
Well,
uh
I would even say in book 4 in the Two Rivers,
mm,
where he was thrust into this position, and he looked to mostly Tam and Abel to help him, and they were like, "No, you're the leader. Tell us what
yeah.
to do." And he was like, "Well, do this within your knowledge range." And then they was, "Okay, we'll do it," and they went and did it. Whereas now he's like, "No, you have to do this because I said so." Some things work in an assembly line, but an assembly line is not an innovative business.
Mhm,
And he right now he's in an organic system. He needs to stay ahead of everything.
mhm.
He's not making the car that was already designed. It's he's out of his wheelhouse a little bit.
Which is a contrast to um the previous chapter title, which a blacksmith's puzzle. And
Mm-hmm.
that carries over into this chapter as he's examining, this Shido stronghold is basically what it has become. And all right, how do I crack this nut? All right, how do I do this puzzle? So his mind is kind of going in the right direction, but it's on the wrong track
Mm-hmm.
because he's all twisted up inside. So he's got the right instincts, and he does have enough experience and training now to be going in the right direction, but he has, forgotten how to do it the right way. All right, any other thoughts? I figured we'd stop there unless you wanted to go into the Fail chapter, which is what
No, that's a
chapter
good
9 is.
stopping place, because it really does change, because this is where Jordan gets good again. Is he's good at Perrin's point of view versus
Mhm,
Fael's point of view, and it
mhm,
is a very masculine versus feminine transition. And this is something that gets him in trouble with people. But the more and more and more we learn about men and women and the motivating factors, and the data that comes out about the differences in how they behave, he was right on.
mhm.
10 years before, or 15 years before, this stuff is really becoming mainstream. So I think that's a good place to go to spoilers.
All right. So hopefully we didn't ramble too much there. Um,
I don't think we did. We're still under an hour, so
yeah, and I know we didn't do the moment by moment as we usually do, but there just wasn't a lot to talk about there as far as stuff, at least as far as our interests are. It was more the big ideas of what's happening.
yeah. Because if you really want to break it down, he started looking, made some mistakes. He's still
Mhm,
looking. He found. There you go.
mhm.
Yeah.
All right, so we'll look at comments and spoilers. Go away
Yeah.
if
If
I know
if it's
nobody
your first
watches
time
this,
reading, yeah.
but if you're one of the 10 people who watched the last video and it's your first time reading through, go away if it's your first time.
Okay. So we already talked about the Matt comment. A skull would make a very poor cup. Yes, it would. It would.
Well, except it's the skull cap.
Well, even
So
still,
it's
it'd be very flat. It'd be a better bowl than a
no,
cup.
it is. So it's a Greek thing. They drank out of shallow bowls
Mm.
instead of cups. So I don't remember others, but I know the Greeks did that, and that's kind of where the libation things come from. Is they would drink out of these shallow bowls and they would tip out a little bit as an offering to the gods, and so that's what it's a drinking bowl, uh, and that's what he's using there.
The Shanshan culture seems
Yeah.
to entirely deny the existence of creatures of the shadow. We see this in Perrin's story too about Trollocs and the Banner General, which is weird because aren't there stories in other parts of the books where the Trollocs attack northern parts of Shanshan as well?
I believe we hear about that later, but now there is. I'm trying to remember when it is. It may be in the next book when we meet the general that Perrin's going to make a deal with. Maybe it's her who says this or thinks this, that they're, according to their stories, according to their history. But now remember, their history is doubly warped because you have the emperor empress, you have the throne who's going to put out, the narrative that they want. But we also know that Sanshin are heavily influenced by the shadow and they don't know it. Because Ishi, I don't remember exactly when it is, Ishi brags that one of the things that he did in the guise of Balsamon was to whisper in Hawkwing's ear. So
Mm-hmm.
somehow he influenced Hawkwing to send his son across the sea, which, as he says, sealed two dooms. So it weakened Hawkwing so that he wasn't able to conquer Tarvalon, and his armies were weakened so that when he died, it created the fractured, 100 years of civil war after his death. But then it also, the other doom it sealed is that army was able to conquer that continent and then come back. And
Mm-hmm.
so Ishi has been laying those seeds, laying that groundwork. And I think there's also a hint there that that he helped to create the Domine and Soldam idea. And so their culture, their history is heavily influenced by the dark, and they don't know it. So it could
Well,
be
it's funny you brought up Domini, excuse me, Domani, according to our research. So I think the last time or the time before,
I'm never going to remember to do that.
Domani, the Shanshan culture deny the shadow, except that they actually refer to women who can channel
Mm-hmm.
as being part of the shadow.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a denial of the things you don't see every day, but the thing they want to control, they control it because you make it the other by making it shadow.
Yeah, I think their idea is not so much that they deny the shadow, but that they deny that it's active, because in their world and their worldview, they conquered the shadow. So they know the last battle is coming because
Mm-hmm.
they have prophecies that appear to be warped. Again, that's probably Ishii's influence that have twisted their prophecies. That, in fact, I think it's hinted at that this is one of the reasons that the return is happening now, is because they have to unite the world under them in order to win the last battle. That's part of their prophecies, which again, that's Ishii's doing because he wants the chaos. He wants humanity fighting itself. And so to to their worldview, they have they have time to do this because there is no shadow. The shadow has been pushed back, and it will return for the last battle, but it's not threatening us now.
And I'm looking for something on the last comment there about Hawkwing's face. This is something that irritates me in general, and it irritates me in this specific situation because the fact that there was a debate on this irritates me. Because when she says it, there's actually a whole paragraph
Yeah.
that states exactly where he knows it from, and people are still debating on whether it's Falm.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like,
Yeah.
no, it's page
It's right there.
141 in the hardback.
Yes. We
About
talked about it
three-quarters of
last
the way
time.
down. Yeah, it's in
Yes.
italics.
Yeah.
It's not even in regular print. And this is, I hear interviewers and stuff where the person will answer the question and they'll still keep going on the same talking point. That's what this feels like to me with this debate.
Mm-hmm.
It's like,
Mm-hmm.
no, it's not Falm. Had we come up with this and there were no paragraph there, maybe we can make that argument.
I'm not sure Matt remembers Fall because of how spotty his memories are
Mm-hmm.
before he was healed. I'm not entirely sure he remembers it.
And that's a better debate.
You know what? That actually no,
Because the book
because
already tells us where he knows Hawkwing's face from.
remember when he wakes up in the Dragon Reborn, it takes him a minute to realize, holy crap, I blew the horn.
Mm-hmm.
He doesn't remember it first. And so I
Oh, I
think the
thought he blew the
details are
horn
pretty
and then
Scotty.
realized he was a hero of the horn.
Oh, shut up.
And his
Oh,
makeshift
jeez.
spear that would never ever work in combat was, we've all, everyone that's been a little boy at some point, we've tried to make a spear that way.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Has it ever worked? No.
No, the head immediately goes. Brank.
Yeah. Yeah, which is, sometimes what happens to me, but that's because I drink too much. Oh.
Yeah. All right. So those are the comments out of the way. Spoilery things. Okay, so there are two scenes that I think are the whole point of Perrin's storyline from the end of Crown of Swords to almost the end of the book. I think this entire slog is really for two things. One, it's when he throws the axe away, which is a tremendous scene. I think as a scene, it's probably the best thing in this whole book. The problem is the lack of impact because of all the things we've been ranting about. And then the second one is the forging of Mjolnir.
Mm-hmm.
It's spelled slightly different, but basically he makes Mjolnir. He makes Ramra. And Because he's you know Jordan talked about how he drew on all these sources both consciously and subconsciously, and one of the kind of avatars of Perrin is he's Thor.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and again, that too lacks impact because he's he's saying things that basically he's already said and already done about, the I'm just a blacksmith, but if you want me to lead you, I'll lead you. Is basically kind of the point of that scene.
Mm-hmm.
And it takes so bloody long to get there, and it's such a convoluted route that it doesn't have the impact. That scene in a vacuum is awesome. Same thing with when he throws the X away. That scene's incredible. It's very impactful in a vacuum. And that's what I was looking for when I read that chapter because of the title of the chapter. As I was wondering, is this at first it made me forget. I was like, wait, this isn't where he throws the X away, is it? I was like, no, 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 we're not there yet. So that was my first thought is, wait, I thought that happened later in the book here. And
Well,
then my
let me
then the
pause this
next
for
thought
just a
was,
second, and then I
yeah.
we'll go into that. All right, sorry, old man pee break.
Well, and I had to get something to I blame you for bringing up the terrible show. I got I got accosted by this nice old Ukrainian man the last time I went to stock up. And have you heard of Kruto?
I have not heard of Kruto. Delicious.
This is the only vodka I have ever had that can be drunk straight. Because
Oh,
you see like in movies and stuff when they show Russians and they're just pouring straight vodka and sipping it. And I'm like, that's impossible. No, no. This is the smoothest I have of anything I have ever tasted.
uh, back to Perrin and the hammer and the axe. The axe and hammer argument did not need the forging in the end.
Mm,
And this is where I wonder what was in the notes and what was written. Because what the forging in the end came to me is what you complain about with the show is it was just a cool moment.
yeah.
It was just a like we're gonna bring the fanboys in and have this really cool moment that
That
everybody remembers. The only structural part of it that I kind of see as part of the overarching story is it was bringing back the using the power and the blacksmithing at the same time. But that's not really a good thing because we just got with Agenor where we got in other scenes where he's using the power to take souls to make Thakandar blades, it's
yeah, they have
it's
to be quenched in blood.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's not exactly a great thing, but I can see that part of it being part of the big story. But realistically, it just came across to me like, oh, this is a cool
It
moment. And it really wasn't
yeah.
even used in the story because
Yeah.
he fought Isam in the dream world where they hardly used real weapons because the weapon he forged wasn't even there because it can't be in the dream world other than in his mind. So,
That's a really good point that I haven't really considered before is that should have been a bigger deal.
mhm,
Much like it should have been a bigger deal. And to your point, wondering what's in the notes, I do I do now thinking in hindsight, and with you having pointed out that Sanderson admitted he identified the most with Perrin, so Perrin was the easiest to write. It
mhm,
makes me wonder if he was indulging in that scene because
mhm,
I feel like I feel like if Jordan had meant for that to be bigger, he would have set it up sooner. Because
mhm,
the analogy to me is that should have, if that was supposed to be a big effing deal, like they kind of say it's a big deal in the moment. The Aes Sedai are like in awe of what just happened. And uh uh and so they say, so Sanderson says, but he doesn't really he tells but he doesn't show, because that should have been a parallel to the canons, because that
mhm,
is a big effing deal and we see it and we have seen it really since the Dragon Reborn when he used the fireworks to blow a hole in the stone.
mhm.
So it's been hinted at for that long.
You could have even had something so far back when Perrin is working in the forge, your favorite scene
Mm.
in book 3, You could have had Moiraine there, just like scratching her chin, going, "My goodness, there's an art to this," and her like feeling something inside. You could have even had something silly like that in the beginning that would have been like completely out of place, that paid off, 8 books later. But going back to the axe, so let's remove that scene. Then I think it's ridiculous. I think it was forced, as a lot of things Sanderson did. But what did the axe represent with Perrin? It wasn't his bloodlust. It wasn't the rager. It was his youth.
Mm.
Why did he have the axe in the first place? Go back to book one.
Because
Because
Harold
he,
caught him playing with it, basically practicing with using it,
mhm.
swinging it
he
around in the
he was in
backyard.
his head with adventures and thoughts of
Yep, yep,
grandeur.
yep.
Yeah, that's why he had it. It was his youth.
That's a
Now,
good
what do we
point.
know about young men? They're very hot-headed too. So when you look at the parallel, the axe was his youthful hot-headedness, and the hammer is him growing up. And we kind of lose that
Mm,
because the hammer, yes, he throws away the axe, which is beautiful, but then he beats people's face in with the hammer.
hmm hmm
It's a huge paradox. He doesn't start building with the hammer. I think going forward, and I don't know where Jordan wanted to go with this because he threw it away here, so he was still writing. What
Yeah,
would have been an adult separation of when I need to use which tool.
that's a good point.
And I
Because
think that
this
I
is
think that's
something,
yeah, this is part of the slog, is because Perrin becomes one or the other.
yeah,
Perrin basically becomes the other, but then uses it for the same purpose instead of realizing that either I'm going to be one or the other, or I need to separate those two parts of me. This is how I am at home. This is how I am at work, right? It's if you're a cop, you have to be a certain way in public than you are in your home life. It's a completely different thing, right? We get the contrast with the sea folk. I'm the boss in public, so I'm submissive in home life, and we didn't get that here. Jordan even does the contrasts in all these other things, and he doesn't do that here. He doesn't learn the real lesson. He just uses a different tool to do the same thing.
that's a good point because of how long ago this idea was set up and how it was set up.
Mm-hmm.
Because this is set up all the way back in book one, like the first half of book one, when Elias stops him from throwing it away right then and there, because he thought about, if those crows catch us, I have to kill Egwene because I won't let her die like that.
Mm-hmm.
And it disgusts him and he wants to throw it away. And basically, I hadn't thought about it in this context before, but basically Elias is saying what you're saying there, because Elias is the adult mentor. And he's saying, no, that's not why you throw it away. You throw it away when you start liking to use it, but you still use it because it's a tool and you
Mm-hmm.
need it.
What might have been better in the grand scheme of things is him to forge an axe with the hammer,
Mm,
and then after the last battle, toss the axe to the side and be like, "This is useless anymore. It's time to rebuild."
mhm. It's a good point. That actually would have been more satisfying.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's why I say that scene, and we'll talk about it more when we get there, is great in a vacuum, but then it falls flat because you keep reading and it doesn't seem to have done anything except now he wields a different tool.
Mm-hmm. Well, and this is what we've talked about before. You've mentioned that Jordan has specifically stated that he wrote the end before anything else.
Mm-hmm.
And when you do that, you start writing a story, and then you realize along the way, when you have this many moving parts, that, oh my gosh, this is kind of going away from what I had in the end.
Mm.
And so you kind of try to redirect the ship, but it leaves a lot of holes in there.
Yeah, yeah, and especially when you're writing something so expansive, it has you can if anyone who's ever written a really long paper, a really long essay you know for a class, I'm talking like when you get up into the 20 plus page range, you can accidentally meander. It can kind of take on a life of its own. And so now
Yeah, I
imagine
just did 15 pages.
800 pages.
Yeah, I just
Yeah.
did 15 pages front and back handwritten for my last exam. So
So now imagine
my hand was
eight
cramping
an
so bad.
800-page book and then a dozen of those books.
14, more than a dozen.
Yeah, well,
It
a
was
dozen.
supposed to be 15.
Yeah.
And I have a feeling of some of the shortcomings were because they try to push
Yes.
everything into the last one. But
Yeah, we've talked about that before, is that when he knew he wasn't going to overcome his amyloidosis, that he was trying to rush,
mhm.
and then he realized I'm not going to finish. I can't do this. I won't make it. And so then he kind of slowed down and said, "All right, I have to get my notes in order and set this up for someone else because I'm not going to make it."
Yeah, that's a part of this whole process that we can bitch and moan about so much about these books, but we can't understand that because we're not there.
Yeah.
We
Yeah.
we haven't gotten that note that says you have this long.
Well, and I think it had to have been additionally painful because I remember following along in real time, and there were, notes and posts and statements where there was a time where he thought he was getting better. And I'm pretty sure I remember reading at the time that amyloidosis is always fatal.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but his numbers, I believe it's has something to do with electrolytes or something. Uh, I remember posts where his numbers were getting better and he was being optimistic. And so that was probably wishful thinking. He probably hadn't the stages of grief, he probably hadn't hit the acceptance part yet. And so then when it hit that, no, that probably made it even worse. Which is going to have an impact on how things turned out. Which is why it's such a damn shame. And as much as we, you know, nerd rant about things, really it's an incredibly sad story because it's not, oh darn it, this did, why didn't you make this turn out the way it did? It's, oh man, I wish this could have turned out the way we thought it would have turned out, or was going to turn out, or you know ultimately in the end it is a tragedy because as much as he worked in the last months of his life to make sure that the vision, the product that came out met his vision, there was no way it was going to. It was always just going to be close. And it was a matter of how close to Jordan's actual vision did the end product become.
Mm-hmm. It's yeah. It's what you talked about having hope when you're going through something like that. The thing about medicine that people don't realize when you have a chronic illness uh is that it's always getting better, and there's always, if you have a positive outlook on things, that you're always having the hope that there's going to be an advancement that helps
Mm,
you.
mm,
And this is for those in the audience that don't follow our other stuff, this is something I can speak to personally, because when I was born, my life expectancy was 11, and he may be able to ride a bike someday, is what they told my mother. And I think the procedure I had when I was 4 months old had only been actively being used for about a year. And well, I'm obviously older than 11. And then the next time I had an issue was at 25 years old. And they had an advancement on that procedure where they don't even need to rip you apart. Like, I've got a scar that goes from here all the way to almost the middle of my back here, where they rip your ribs open to get to your heart to do what they need to
wait, I thought
do.
it was a Mako shark attack to you while you were.
There's ninjas in the alley,
Right,
but
right.
uh but now they just go in through your artery and go up there and do the exact same procedure that I had when I was 4 months old, and we redid it with basically a balloon put up my artery to blow everything back up and make it normal. And that didn't exist 40 years ago, 43 years ago when I was born. And there's always that hope that there's going to be that medical advancement that could happen. And I just happened to pick the right time to be born. That's my luxury in life right now, because every time I go to a cardiologist now, because we get this checked every year or so, they bring the interns in or the residents in because I'm one of the few people my age that has this condition because it was just being corrected at that time. And so I am something that these people will never see in their residency unless they see me or one of the like other couple hundred people in this country. And so it's chronic illness is a mind fuck because you want to enjoy life, but you always had that looming over you. And where he was at, I can see that feeling of wanting to leave something behind. And had it been me, I would have been really trying to finish.
Yeah.
And because I wouldn't have wanted it to be someone else. So I could see some things being left open because I was really trying to do it myself.
That that's a sad and sobering but interesting thought for the next book, because Knife of Dreams is the last one he wrote fully himself. And I kind of feel like there is an element of hope there in that book, in the storylines that are resolved there. And I imagine part of that is because we're right at the cusp of the climax. We're right at the cusp of the last battle. And so there is an element of hope of humanity is going to make it. But I hadn't thought about it in the personal terms of, I wonder how much of that of Jordan's personal hope was put into that writing. And
Mm-hmm.
I wonder if that is because I've always wondered, do I like Knife of Dreams as much as I do because of the work itself or because of all the real life stuff that surrounds it? Being
Mm-hmm.
that that was the last one he wrote. And it was and when it was on its way to being published, or when he was working on it, when it was on its way to being published, that was when he was making these hopeful posts about the numbers are looking good, my numbers are up, and these things. And so that is something to think about when we actually get there and start talking about it.
Yeah, and it's really difficult subject to talk about because it's like losing a family member, and everybody, oh, you're being dramatic because you never knew him, right?
Mhm.
This was a bigger part of my life
Yeah.
than almost every cousin I have. And so he was basically a family member because
Yeah.
he created the joy of everything when I was escaping the real world for probably what 20 something years. And well, even now we're talking about it now, so even
Mhm.
more than that. And so yeah, it is like losing a family member when somebody like that goes away. That's why celebrity deaths hit people so hard.
Well,
Be-
yeah,
because
especially if it's someone that they've invested a lot of their own personal time in.
or in emotional energy, it's this person made me happy. David Bowie was one of my favorite musical artists ever. When
I
he
thought he was a
passed
better actor than a musician,
up,
but yeah.
yeah, Labyrinth is one of the best movies ever. But it's there's a part of you that invested in that enjoyment. Robin Williams,
Mm,
how much pain did everybody feel when he passed away?
yeah.
I mean, he was Patch Adams. That was him as a person.
Yeah.
That movie was made to be him. And the whole point of the movie was he created joy in these people who were dying's life.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's how everybody felt when he passed away. And so it's really hard when we're doing the critique parts of of this episode. Well, I think this is a good episode that we kind of got on this subject because we're
Yeah.
talking about the slog. Is this person is extremely missed, and we will never know the real end, and we will never know the real end. In his mind, might have made the slog worth it,
True.
and we'll never know that. We will never know that. Uh, I did make a note here, and I think this might be a good place to end on. This portion of the books is still part of the process of making the men what they need to be for the final battle. And I think what makes Perrin's part so horrible is that was done. by the end of book 4.
Yeah, like I was saying when I was vamping because you had to get up and deal with stuff. There was still stuff to learn, but he had basically already been established. It's like,
Mm-hmm.
so I was using the analogy of a junior officer versus a staff officer. If you read uh Colonel Halmore's book, or if you watch the movie We Were Soldiers, he was in that position as a battalion commander because he had been a very good and effective platoon and company commander in Korea.
Mm-hmm.
So there were still things he needed to learn to be able to manage more men in battle, but he was able to do it because that core was already there. And we could have seen that growth and that learning without disrupting the core of who Perrin was at the end of book 4.
Yeah, we could have had Elias come back into his life and help him with the wolf progression a little bit more. We could have
Yes,
had
definitely.
yeah, we could have had him going after the Shido like they are now, but something to the extent of quit treating them like they're Trollocs. They're
Mm,
humans too.
mm. It's a
And
good
yes,
point.
they are enemy, but you keep treating them like they're Trollocs. And we could have had that progression where it's the same person, but it's just building, 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 building. But as far as what he needed to be for the end of the books, it was exactly what happened in the Two Rivers. He faced down evil, he beat evil, and then he rebuilt.
Mm.
And that's where everyone wanted the Perrin character to go, because that's where we thought he was supposed to be. And you don't need M. Night Shyamalan in every movie, right?
And you do see glimpses of that, and we'll get into it more when we actually get there. But
Well, that's the whole point of going to the hammer.
one of my favorite scenes is when he shows up, is I think it's in the next book. I think it's in Knife of Dreams, when he's in the dream in the White Tower, and he shocks Egwene, who's had formal training in the dream world, when he just bats away balefire, and she's like, "How can you do that?" It's just a dream. It's just another part of the dream.
Mm-hmm.
He was necessary to be in that moment because he has the right mentality to really intuitively understand the dream world.
Mm-hmm. And that could have been the development, which
That
we get.
should have been the
Yeah,
bigger part of the
we get
development. Yeah.
this, and then a rushed version of that
Yes. Yeah.
in the end.
Well, we'll talk more about it when we get to those parts, because they are there. It's just it's a shame they weren't the focus rather than what the focus is here.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not all crap. I will say that in rereads, I developed a greater appreciation for Fail, because I think her parts, and it may be partly simply because there's less of them, so they have to be more concise.
Mm.
That I found her parts during this slog more refreshing and more uh, kind of spot on with who her character was, and
Mm-hmm.
I feel like she had a better development there than Perrin did.
Well, and I hate the hate that goes towards Roland online.
Hmm.
He's not a bad character. He's
No,
actually he's
that's the point.
he is actually what you would expect of a man in that situation.
That's why what happens to him is so
It's supposed to be so
shocking and
horrible.
sad.
But I hate these articles, all these freaking feminists, right? That he's a
Yes.
rapist and all this
Oh,
stuff. I'm
geez.
like, if he was a rapist, he would have raped her.
Yeah. Yeah. That's kind of the definition.
That's the point. The whole point is he didn't.
Yeah.
He didn't. If you would just look beyond Me Too for a second, he didn't do anything because she said no.
And we'll actually get to it when we get to it, but that's going to be some sexy time because she still feels guilty because of what you've talked about.
That
It's
she
not
was
the
on the verge of
deed.
saying yes.
Well,
Yeah.
no, it's not the deed, it's the relationship for
Mm-hmm.
women,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
she was
Because she
like,
did develop an emotional connection to
she
him.
developed an emotional attachment to him, and that makes her feel guilty. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Which was that, that's part of the brilliance of her scenes and that writing. So yeah,
All right. Anything else?
that's all I got.
That's all I got. Well, we'll see you next time. We gave no disclaimers needed other than read a book every once in a while, and hopefully read these books because they were some of the best ever written.
Yep.
And We'll do it next time, next week. I don't even know what our social subject is.
Oh, who knows?
We've
World War Three,
we've
probably. Maybe World War Three will have started by then.
probably we've talked a lot of stuff. There were some social issues that we've thrown back and forth, and I'll have to look at. I actually wrote some down that
Yeah.
I'll have to look at those, and we'll see what magic comes out of it. What did I write? Oh, I must have been drunk. Girls
There
need
was
to
we had some sexy type thoughts, so
girls need to
I
talk about feelings. Guys need to actually feel things.
hmm,
I don't know where that thought came from. I'll have to look at
it's an
where
interesting thought indeed.
yeah. But no, okay, I know where that came from. I remember now.
All right, well then we'll talk about it next time.
All
See
right,
y'all then.
later.